My name is Alora Winters, 29, and yesterday I discovered that the entire foundation of my family was built on lies. Standing in my parents' pristine kitchen during my brother's rehearsal dinner, I casually mentioned to my Aunt Margaret how excited I was for tomorrow's ceremony. She glanced around nervously, then whispered, "Honey, I don't think you should be there. Your brother isn't actually your brother, he's your half-brother. And your father isn't your real father either." Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into this family bombshell, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy family drama stories with unexpected twists like this one, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for weekly true stories that'll make your jaw drop. Now, let's continue with how my aunt's words shattered my entire world. Growing up in Oak Ridge, Connecticut, the Winters family was the envy of our small town. My father, Richard Winters, was a respected cardiologist who saved countless lives at Oak Ridge Memorial. My mother, Diana, served as the chairwoman of numerous charity committees and was known for her impeccable taste and flawless dinner parties. My brother Connor, 3 years my senior, had followed in our father's footsteps and was now a rising star at the same hospital. And then there was me, Elora, the artistic one, the family rebel who chose photography over medicine but was still part of this seemingly perfect unit. Our home life seemed straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Sunday brunches after church, summer vacations in Cape Cod, Christmas card photos that neighbors kept on their refrigerators year-round. Dad would tell the same embarrassing stories about Connor's and my childhood at every gathering, and Mom would roll her eyes affectionately while refilling everyone's glasses. I had friends who complained about their dysfunctional families, and I nodded sympathetically while secretly feeling grateful for my boring, stable family life. Connor's engagement to Melissa, a pediatric nurse he met at the hospital, was the culmination of our family's perfect trajectory. The rehearsal dinner at my parents' house last night had been planned for months. White tents in the backyard, catering from the best restaurant in town, fairy lights strung across the garden. I had flown in from New York 3 days earlier to help with final preparations and to serve as the photographer for both the rehearsal and the wedding. I was sorting through candid shots I had taken earlier that evening when I wandered into the kitchen for more wine. Aunt Margaret was there nursing a gin and tonic by herself. She had always been the family's black sheep. Dad's sister, who had moved to California in the 82nds, married 3 times and only flew back east for major family events. She'd been drinking steadily all evening, her cheeks flushed pink against her silvery bob. "There's my favorite niece," she said, patting the bar stool beside her. "How's the big city treating you?" I showed her some recent photos from a gallery exhibition I'd participated in while we chatted about my life in New York. When I mentioned how excited I was for tomorrow's ceremony, I noticed something shift in her expression, a flash of discomfort, maybe even guilt. "Honey, I don't think you should be there," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face remained serious. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Your brother isn't actually your brother, he's your half-brother," she continued, glancing toward the doorway to make sure we were alone. "And your father isn't your real father either." My wine glass froze halfway to my lips. "Aunt Margaret, that's not funny." "I'm not trying to be funny, Elora. I've kept this secret for nearly 30 years and it's eaten at me every day. Your mother had an affair with her graduate school professor. Richard isn't your biological father." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Outside, I could hear the gentle laughter of guests, the clinking of glasses, the soft music playing under the tent where my family was celebrating. Inside, my entire identity was crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. "You're drunk," I said, standing up abruptly. "You don't know what you're saying. Look at the family photos, Elora. Really look. Everyone says you don't resemble either of your parents. There's a reason for that." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Ask your mother about Professor James Harrington from Columbia. Watch her face when you say his name. I backed away, bumping into the kitchen island. Why are you doing this? Why now? Because I saw how they've treated you all these years. The subtle differences in how they treat you versus Connor. The way Richard always held back just a little bit with you. You deserved better, and you deserved to know the truth. I fled the kitchen without another word, locking myself in my childhood bedroom as voices from the party drifted upstairs. Sitting on my bed, surrounded by soccer trophies and prom photos, I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never thought to do before. I searched for James Harrington from Columbia University. What I found made my blood run cold. James Harrington stared back at me from my phone screen, a distinguished man with a silver beard and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Professor Emeritus of Comparative Literature at Columbia University. Author of several critically acclaimed novels. Recipient of numerous academic awards. And, unmistakably, the man had my exact same crooked smile, the same unusual hazel eyes with gold flecks that had always made me feel special but different. I scrolled through images with shaking hands, finding more similarities, the slight dimple in our left cheeks, the way our eyes crinkled at the corners when we smiled. One photo showed him accepting an award, his hands gesturing expressively, hands that looked exactly like mine with long fingers and prominent knuckles that Dad Richard had always commented didn't come from his side of the family. The bedroom door creaked open and my mother stood in the doorway. The sounds of the party continued downstairs, but seemed far away now, like they were happening in another dimension. "Alora, people are asking where you've gone," she said, her voice trailing off as she noticed my expression. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I turned my phone screen toward her. "James Harrington," I said, watching her face carefully. The blood drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it as if needing its support to remain standing. "Where did you hear that name?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter." "Is he my father?" She closed her eyes and I saw a tear slip down her cheek. In that moment, before she even spoke, I knew it was true. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she said finally. Rage bubbled up inside me, hot and unexpected. "How did you want me to find out?" "After another 30 years, never. Please keep your voice down," she begged, glancing nervously at the door. "Your father Richard doesn't want anyone to know." "He knows." This revelation hit me like another blow. "He's known all this time." Mom sank onto the edge of my bed, careful to maintain distance between us. We were going through a rough patch early in our marriage. Richard was always at the hospital. I was finishing my master's degree and feeling neglected. James was my thesis advisor, and he understood me in ways Richard couldn't. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "It was brief, just a few months. When I found out I was pregnant, I confessed everything to Richard. He agreed to raise you as his own, under one condition, that no one would ever know the truth." "Except Aunt Margaret," I said bitterly. "She overheard us arguing one night when you were still a baby. Richard made her swear to keep the secret." Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Alora, please try to understand. Richard loves you, does he?" I interrupted. "Because I've always felt this. Distance. Like I was an obligation, not a daughter." "That's not true," she insisted, but her eyes told a different story. "Does Connor know?" "No," she said firmly. "And he can never know. Especially not now, not before his wedding." I laughed incredulously. "So I'm supposed to stand there tomorrow smiling for photos, pretending nothing has changed, that my entire life hasn't been a lie?" "Yes," she said, her voice hardening. "That's exactly what you're going to do. You will not ruin your brother's wedding with this ancient history." "Half-brother," I corrected. Her hand moved faster than I could react, slapping me hard across the cheek. We both froze in shock. She had never hit me before. "I'm sorry," she whispered, horror in her eyes. Elora, please, get out, I said, my voice deadly calm. After she left, I sat in silence for what felt like hours. Downstairs, the party gradually wound down. Cars departed. The house grew quiet. My mind raced with calculations. If I was 29 and Mom had been with James Harrington before I was born, that meant she'd kept the secret for 3 decades. I opened my laptop and searched for more information about James Harrington. He was 68 now, retired, but still giving occasional lectures. He lived in Manhattan, less than 10 blocks from my apartment. The cosmic irony was almost too much to bear. I had been living near my biological father for years without knowing it. On impulse, I found his email address on the Columbia University website and began typing. I had no plan, no clear idea of what I wanted to say. I just knew I couldn't spend another minute living in ignorance. My name is Elora Winters, I wrote. I recently discovered that you may be my biological father. I was born on the 12th of June, 1996. My mother is Diana Winters, formerly Diana Lowell. If this means anything to you, please contact me. I included my phone number and email address, then hit send before I could change my mind. The action felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying, like jumping off a cliff without knowing how deep the water below might be. Then I did something I knew would infuriate my mother. I booked a hotel room in town for the night and packed a small bag. I couldn't stay in this house of lies for another minute. As I crept downstairs with my suitcase, I heard voices from my father's Richard study. The door was slightly ajar and I caught a glimpse of my mother sobbing while Richard paced the room. How could Margaret do this? He was saying, his voice tight with anger. After all these years of keeping up appearances, she chooses now to unravel everything Elora knows, my mother replied between sobs. She found him online. She saw the resemblance. Of course she did, Richard said bitterly. She always was too curious for her own good. Just like him. Just like him. 3 simple words that confirmed everything. I slipped out the front door without saying goodbye, texting Connor that I wasn't feeling well and would see him at the church tomorrow. As I drove toward the hotel, my phone pinged with a new email notification. Elora, it read. I've waited for this message for 29 years. Yes, I am your father. When can we meet, James? I barely slept that night, tossing and turning in the impersonal hotel room while my mind raced with questions. By dawn, I had made a decision. I would attend Connor's wedding as planned, maintaining the facade for his sake. But afterward, I would confront my parents properly and meet James Harrington. No more secrets, no more lies. I had arranged to meet the bridal party at the church for pre-ceremony photos at 10 a.m. My professional instincts took over as I set up lighting and positioned people for shots, going through the motions while feeling completely detached from the happy occasion. Each time Richard appeared in my viewfinder, I had to force myself not to flinch. Each time he called me sweetheart or my girl, I felt physically ill. Connor noticed something was off. During a break while Melissa was having her veil adjusted, he cornered me near the altar. Are you okay, Elle? He asked, genuine concern in his eyes. You seem distant today. I forced a smile. Just tired. It was a late night. I heard you didn't stay at the house. His brow furrowed. Did something happen with Mom and Dad? Nothing worth discussing on your wedding day, I assured him, patting his arm. This is your moment. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. As guests began arriving for the ceremony, I spotted Aunt Margaret entering the church looking somber in a navy dress. Our eyes met across the vestibule and she gave me a sad little nod. I turned away, unable to decide if I felt gratitude or anger toward her for upending my life. My phone vibrated in my pocket, another email from James. Elora, I understand if you need time. Just know that not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you. Diana told me you existed but made it clear that Richard had claimed you as his own. I respected their marriage and stayed away, but I followed your career from afar. Your photography exhibitions in New York have made me so proud. When you're ready to talk, I'm here, James." He had been following my career. My biological father had been secretly cheering me on, while the man I called Dad had always seemed vaguely disappointed by my artistic pursuits. The irony was almost too much to bear. The wedding coordinator was frantically waving at me. It was time for the ceremony to begin. I tucked my phone away and picked up my camera, forcing myself back into professional mode. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's canon and the procession started. I photographed it all, Mom being escorted to her seat, her eyes red-rimmed but her smile firmly in place. Connor standing nervously at the altar. The bridesmaids processing in their dusty rose dresses. When Richard walked Melissa down the aisle, her own father had died years ago. I captured his proud smile, wondering if he had ever looked at me that way. The ceremony proceeded like a beautiful dream sequence. Vows exchanged rings, placed a tender first kiss as husband and wife. Throughout it all, I remained behind my camera, the lens creating a barrier between me and this family that was only partially mine. At the reception held at the Oak Ridge Country Club, I continued my photographic duties while dodging questions about why I seemed so subdued. During the father-daughter dance between Melissa and Richard, I felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy. When Richard raised his glass to toast my son and his beautiful bride, emphasizing the word my, I wondered if anyone else caught the significance. As dinner wound down and the dancing began in earnest, I slipped outside onto the terrace for some air. The summer evening was perfect, stars emerging in a velvet sky, the scent of roses from the garden below, distant laughter and music from inside. In another life, it would have been a moment to savor. My phone rang, an unknown New York number. My heart stuttered. "Hello," I answered, my voice barely audible. "Elora." The voice was deep, cultured, with a slight tremor that might have been age or emotion. "This is James Harrington." I sank onto a stone bench, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "I didn't expect you to call." "I hope that's all right. I couldn't wait any longer. 29 years is a long time to wonder about your child." "Did you know?" I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "When she told you she was pregnant, did you want to be part of my life?" There was a pause filled with what sounded like a stifled sob. "Yes," he said finally. "I wanted to fight for you, for the right to be your father. But Diana made it clear that Richard would leave her if I didn't stay away, and she didn't want Connor growing up in a broken home. She promised she'd tell you about me someday." "She never did," I said bitterly. "My aunt let it slip last night by accident." "I'm so sorry, Elora. You deserved better." From inside, I heard the DJ announce that it was time for the family photos. I was being summoned back to pose with people who had lied to me my entire life. "I have to go," I told James. "I'm at my half-brother's wedding." "Of course. But Elora, when you're ready, I'd like to meet you. Properly." "I'd like that too," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. As I hung up and turned to go back inside, I saw a figure standing in the doorway. Mom, her face a mask of fury and fear. "Was that him?" she demanded. "Are you talking to him now?" "Yes," I said simply. "He wanted to know me, Mom. All these years he wanted to be my father." "He is not your father," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "Richard raised you. Richard provided for you. Richard is your father in every way that matters." I jerked away from her grasp. "A real father wouldn't have made me feel like I was never quite good enough. A real father would have loved me unconditionally, not as some sort of ongoing penance for his wife's infidelity." "You don't understand what we sacrificed for you." "No, Mom. You sacrificed my right to know who I really am." "And for what?" "So you could keep up appearances, so the perfect Diana Winters wouldn't have a scandal attached to her name." The photographer's assistant poked her head through the doorway. "Mrs. Winters." Everyone's waiting for the family portraits. Mom composed herself instantly, her social mask sliding back into place. We're coming right now, she said brightly, then turned to me with steel in her eyes. We will discuss this later. Right now, you will go in there and smile for those photos as if your life depends on it. Because your relationship with this family does depend on it. Am I clear? In that moment, I saw my mother clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the perfect matriarch, but as a deeply flawed woman who had built her entire identity around other people's perceptions. Crystal clear, I replied, matching her fake smile with one of my own. We walked back inside, together, a picture of mother-daughter harmony. As I took my place beside Connor for the family portrait, Richard's hand resting stiffly on my shoulder, I made another decision. After tonight, nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the wedding, I sat in my hotel room watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. I had one more day in Connecticut before my flight back to New York, and I knew exactly how I needed to spend it. It was time for the truth, all of it. I texted my parents, we need to talk. I'll be at the house at 10. No please, no question mark. This wasn't a request. The drive to my childhood home felt surreal, like I was navigating a familiar route in a dream. The pristine colonial houses of Oak Ridge blurred past my window, their perfect facades suddenly seeming symbolic of the lies people told to maintain appearances. Mom answered the door in her gardening clothes, soil still fresh on her gloves. She'd always retreated to her roses when stressed. Dad Richard sat in the living room with the Sunday paper, pretending this was just another normal family visit. Alora, he said, folding the newspaper precisely. Your mother tells me you've been upset about some historical matters. Historical matters. As if my entire identity was just some dusty footnote in the family archives. I spoke to James Harrington last night, I said, watching his face darken at the name. He confirmed everything. I see. Richard's jaw tightened. And what exactly do you plan to do with this information? I'm meeting him when I get back to New York, Mom gasped. Alora, you can't. Actually, I can, I said, surprised by how steady my voice remained. I'm a 29-year-old woman who just discovered her entire life has been a lie. I think I'm entitled to meet my biological father. After everything we've done for you, Richard said, his voice dangerously low, this is how you repay us, by running to that man. Everything you've done for me, I echoed incredulously. You mean like making me feel like I was never quite good enough? Always comparing me to Connor and finding me wanting? Was that part of the deal too, that you'd raise me but never quite love me the same way? Richard stood abruptly. That is completely unfair. I changed your diapers, I attended your school plays, I paid for your ridiculously impractical art degree. Richard, Mom interjected, please don't. No, Diana, she needs to hear this. He turned back to me, years of resentment finally breaking through his composed exterior. Do you have any idea what it was like, raising another man's child? Seeing his eyes looking back at me every day, reminding me of your mother's betrayal. The room fell silent. In one unguarded moment, he had confirmed what I'd always intuitively felt, but could never prove, that his love for me had always been conditional, performative, part of a bargain struck before I was even born. I knew it, I whispered. I always knew something was wrong. I thought it was me, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that if I could just be more like Connor, you'd love me the same way. That's not true, Mom insisted, tears streaming down her face. Your father loves you. Stop calling him that, I snapped. He's made it perfectly clear how he feels. And you, I turned to her, unleashing decades of unspoken hurt. You let this happen. You watched him treat me differently and said nothing. You denied me the right to know my real father because it was more convenient for you. I was protecting our family, she cried. You were protecting yourself, I corrected. Your reputation, your perfect life, your standing in the community. It was never about what was best for me. Richard had composed himself again, retreating behind the cool doctor's demeanor he wore like armor. What exactly do you want from us, Alora? An apology? Money? I want the truth, I said simply. All of it. How you met James, how long the affair lasted, what happened when you found out you were pregnant. And then I want you to tell Connor. They exchanged alarmed glances. Absolutely not, Richard said firmly. Connor never needs to know about this. He's my brother, half-brother, Richard corrected coldly, throwing my own words back at me. He deserves to know who I really am, I insisted. I won't be the only one carrying this secret. He's on his honeymoon, Mom pleaded. Please, Alora, don't ruin this time for him. I hesitated, remembering Connor's happiness yesterday, how genuinely he had always cared for me. Fine, I won't tell him yet. But when he gets back, he deserves to know the truth. And then what? Richard demanded. Once you've blown up this family completely, what's your end game? It was a good question, one I hadn't fully considered in the whirlwind of the past 2 days. What did I want? Revenge for years of subtle emotional neglect, a new father to replace the one who had always held part of himself back from me, a complete family reset? I don't know, I admitted. But I do know I'm done living with lies. If this family can only exist based on deception, then maybe it shouldn't exist at all. Mom collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing openly now. Please don't say that. We're still your family, Alora. Despite everything. I felt a flicker of pity for her, but it wasn't enough to extinguish the anger that had been building for years without me even knowing its source. Tell me about him, I said, sitting across from her. Not the sanitized version, the truth. How did it start with James? Mom wiped her tears, glancing at Richard, who had turned away to stare out the window. He was brilliant, she said softly, kind, passionate about literature in a way that made everything seem alive. I was 26, feeling trapped in a marriage to a man who worked 80 hours a week and barely noticed me when he was home. Richard flinched but didn't interrupt. James made me feel seen, she continued. We would discuss novels for hours after class. Then, one night, we were the last ones in the building, and it just happened. I told myself it would be just once, but it continued for nearly 4 months. Did you love him? I asked. She looked down at her hands. Yes, she whispered, in a way that was different from how I loved Richard. But when I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to choose. Richard and I had been trying to have a second child for years without success. The timing. It couldn't have been anyone but James's. So you told Richard right away. Not immediately, she admitted. I considered other options first. The implication hung in the air. She had considered terminating the pregnancy. Me. But I couldn't do it. When I finally told Richard, he was devastated. He gave me an ultimatum. End things with James completely, and never tell anyone about the baby's paternity, or he would file for divorce and seek full custody of Connor. And James, did he know about me? I told him I was pregnant, yes. He wanted to leave his wife for me to raise you together. But I couldn't do that to Connor, couldn't break up our family. She looked up at me pleadingly. I made the best decision I could with the information I had at the time. I turned to Richard, who was still staring out the window. And you? Did you ever plan to tell me the truth? No, he said simply. What would have been the point? It would only have hurt you. It hurt me more not knowing I countered. It hurt growing up feeling like there was something wrong with me, something that made you keep me at arm's length. He finally turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. I tried, Alora. God knows I tried to love you the same way I love Connor. But every time I looked at you, I saw him. The man who nearly destroyed my marriage, who created a life with my wife that I couldn't. His honesty, however brutal, was oddly liberating. For the first time in my life, we were speaking to each other without the veneer of politeness that had always characterized our relationship. I'm meeting James tomorrow in New York, I said firmly. I'm not asking for permission. And after that, Richard asked, "Will you still be our daughter or will you run off with your new family?" The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, did I still want to be part of this family? Could I forgive 3 decades of lies? I don't know, I answered honestly. I need time to process all of this, to figure out who I am now that I know the truth. Mom reached for my hand and this time I didn't pull away. Whatever you decide, you'll always be my daughter. I've made terrible mistakes, but loving you was never one of them. As I stood to leave, Richard cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know," he said reluctantly. "Your college tuition, your apartment in New York, the startup funds for your photography business. That wasn't all from us." I froze. "What do you mean James set up a trust for you when you were born? He's been contributing to it ever since with the understanding that you would never know where the money came from. We've just been passing it along." This new revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years, James had been supporting me financially without my knowledge. The independence I'd prized, the career I'd built, all of it had been partially funded by a man I'd never met. "Why would you accept his money if you hated him so much?" I asked Richard. "Because it was for you," he said simply. "And despite what you may think, I did want you to have every opportunity." I walked out of that house feeling like I was leaving more than just a building. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had never truly existed. The Elora Winters, who was Richard and Diana's daughter Connor's full sister, was a fiction created to protect other people's feelings and reputations. Tomorrow, I would meet James Harrington and begin to discover who I really was. Hey everyone, I know you're probably on the edge of your seats wondering what happened when I finally met my biological father. I'll get there in just a moment, but first, if you're enjoying this wild family drama, please hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm show my stories to more people. Are you Team Richard or Team James at this point? Let me know in the comments. Now back to what happened when I finally came face to face with the man whose DNA I shared. The cafe where James Harrington suggested we meet was a small literary hangout in Greenwich Village, the kind of place where authors gave readings and graduate students debated obscure philosophical theories. I arrived 30 minutes early, too nervous to sit still in my apartment. I chose a table in the corner with a clear view of the door and ordered a black coffee that I couldn't bring myself to drink. At exactly noon, he walked in. Despite having studied his photos online, I wasn't prepared for the visceral shock of recognition. He moved like me, the same slightly hurried gait, the same way of scanning a room. He wore a tweed jacket despite the summer heat. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, a leather messenger bag slung across his body. Academic to the core. Our eyes met and he stopped mid-stride. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the cafe, two strangers connected by blood and separated by decades of secrets. "Elora," he said as he approached my name, catching in his throat. "I would have known you anywhere." I stood awkwardly, unsure of the proper greeting for meeting one's biological father for the first time at age 29. A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too familiar. We settled for an uncomfortable half-embrace before sitting down across from each other. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," he said, his voice cultured and warm. "I've imagined this day so many times over the years." "Have you?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "You could have reached out before now." He nodded, accepting the implicit accusation. "I wanted to. Countless times. But I gave my word to your mother that I would stay away until she decided the time was right to tell you about me." He smiled sadly. "I'm not sure she ever would have." "She wouldn't have," I confirmed. "If my aunt hadn't let it slip, I'd still be in the dark." "Margaret," he mused. "I met her once, you know, at a faculty party where Diana brought her. She seemed to see right through our pretense of being just professor and student. She kept your secret for almost 30 years. Until she didn't," he said. For which I'm grateful, even if the timing was complicated. A waitress came by, and James ordered Earl Grey tea with a familiarity that suggested he was a regular here. When she left, he pulled a small package from his messenger bag and placed it on the table between us. I've kept a journal for you since the day Diana told me she was pregnant, he explained. Nothing intrusive, just thoughts about what you might be like, milestones I imagined, you reaching things I wished I could tell you. I stared at the package without touching it. Why didn't you fight harder for me? If you wanted to be in my life so badly, why did you just give up? His expression clouded. Diana made it very clear that Richard would leave her if I insisted on being acknowledged as your father. She would have lost Connor her home, her status in the community. I didn't want to be responsible for destroying her life even though I loved to. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Even though I loved her very much. Did you love her or did you just want to possess her? I challenged. Both, perhaps, he admitted, with surprising candor. I was 40 when we met, divorced, childless, throwing myself into my work to avoid confronting my own loneliness. Diana was brilliant, beautiful, and unhappy. I convinced myself that what we were doing wasn't wrong because her marriage was already failing. He shook his head. The arrogance of that thinking haunts me still. And when she told you she was pregnant, I was overjoyed, he said simply. I wanted to marry her, raise you together. But she chose Richard and Connor, the life she had built, and I had to respect that choice, even though it broke my heart. So you just walked away. Not entirely, he countered gently. I set up the trust fund for you. I kept in touch with Diana, who would send me photos of you occasionally. When you moved to New York and started exhibiting your photography, I attended every gallery showing, standing in the back, just another anonymous admirer of your work. The thought of him being so close, watching me from afar, while I remained oblivious, sent a chill through me. That's a little creepy, actually. He winced. I suppose it would seem that way. I'm sorry. I couldn't stay away completely knowing you were in the same city. I studied him across the table, this stranger who was half of my genetic makeup. The similarities between us were undeniable, not just physical traits but mannerisms, the way he gestured as he spoke, his analytical approach to explaining his actions. I wondered how different my life might have been if he had been my father in more than just biology. Tell me about yourself, he said, breaking the silence. Beyond what I could glean from exhibition catalogs and occasional updates from Diana. What kind of person are you, Elora? I'm not sure I know anymore, I admitted. Everything I thought about myself has been called into question. My whole identity was built around being a Winters, Richard, and Diana's artistic daughter, Connor's sister. Now I don't know who I am. You're still you, he said gently. Finding out about me doesn't change the core of who you are. You're still the talented photographer whose work moves people. You're still the woman who's built a life on her own terms in New York. Those achievements are yours, regardless of your parentage. But I've been living a lie, I insisted. And worse, everyone who claimed to love me has been perpetuating that lie. Including me, he acknowledged. For which I can only ask your forgiveness. But Elora, you must understand, adults often make messy, complicated decisions that seem right at the time. Diana truly believed she was protecting you and Connor by maintaining the fiction of your family. At what cost, I demanded. Do you know what it's like to grow up feeling like you're somehow deficient? To see your brother receiving unconditional love while you're held to a different standard? To never quite measure up in your father's eyes? But I did not understand why James looked stricken. I didn't know it was like that for you. Diana always insisted Richard loved you as his own. Maybe he tried, I conceded. But there was always something missing. Some connection that Connor had with him that I didn't. I'm so sorry, he whispered. If I had known. What? What would you have done differently? He had no answer for that, and we lapsed into uncomfortable silence. The waitress refilled our drinks without comment, sensing the tension between us. I have a question, I said, finally. The trust fund. Was that guilt money a way to ease your conscience for abandoning me? He flinched at my bluntness, in part perhaps. But it was also the only way I could think of to be a father to you when I couldn't be present in your life. I wanted you to have options, opportunities. I wanted you to be free to pursue your passions without financial constraints. So my entire career has been built on a lie too, I said bitterly. I thought I was making it on my own, but really I've been subsidized by my secret biological father all along. The talent is yours alone, he said firmly. The money just removed some obstacles. What you've accomplished with your photography comes from somewhere inside you that has nothing to do with me or Richard or Diana. I wanted to argue, but exhaustion was setting in, emotional fatigue from too many revelations in too short a time. I glanced at the package, still sitting untouched between us. I don't know if I'm ready to read this, I said honestly. Take it anyway, he urged. Read it when you're ready if you ever are. If not, destroy it. But I needed you to know that you were wanted, Alora. Always. By me, at least. I slipped the package into my bag, still uncertain if I would ever open it. What happens now? Do you expect us to have some kind of relationship? I would like that, he said carefully. But only if it's what you want too. I've waited 29 years to know you. I can be patient a while longer. I nodded, appreciating his restraint. I need time to process all of this, to figure out what it means for my relationship with Richard and Diana. With Connor. Of course. He hesitated, then asked, Has Connor been told about me? Not yet. He's on his honeymoon. But I've told my parents that he deserves to know the truth when he returns. And how do you think he'll take it? I considered the question. Connor had always been protective of me, the classic big brother, despite our now revealed half-sibling status. I think he'll be angry on my behalf. Hurt that our parents lied to him too. But Connor and I have always been close. I don't think that will change. James nodded thoughtfully. Family is more than blood, Alora. The bonds you've formed with Connor over a lifetime won't dissolve because of this revelation. And what about us? I asked. Are we family? Can we be after all this time? That's entirely up to you, he said. I would be honored to be part of your life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. A father figure, a friend, a mentor, or simply someone you meet for coffee occasionally to discuss photography and literature. The sincerity in his voice touched something in me. Despite my lingering anger at the situation, I couldn't hate this man who had clearly carried the weight of our separation for decades. Let's start with coffee, I said, and see where it goes from there. Relief washed over his face. I'd like that very much. As we prepared to leave the cafe, he hesitated. There's one more thing you should know. I have other children, 2 daughters from my first marriage. Your half-sisters, Jessica and Emma. They're a bit older than you, 36 and 34. They know about you and have always wanted to meet you. More family I never knew existed. More connections, more complications. Do they look like me too? I asked the question, slipping out before I could stop it. He smiled. Jessica has your eyes. Emma has your talent with visual arts. She's an architect in Boston. Sisters. The word felt foreign on my tongue. I'm not ready for that yet. Of course, he agreed quickly, one step at a time. We exchanged phone numbers and parted with another awkward half-hug. As I watched him walk away down the street, his tweed jacket making him stand out among the summer tourists, I felt an odd mixture of loss and possibility, mourning the decades we would never get back, while contemplating what our future might hold. Back in my apartment, I placed his package of journals on my bookshelf without opening it. I needed to process everything that had happened before I was ready to read his private thoughts about me. Instead, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Connor. When you get back from your honeymoon, we need to talk. Something important has come up. Enjoy Bali. Love you. Then I opened my laptop and searched for information about Jessica and Emma Harrington. My half-sisters. More family I never knew I had. Connor called me the moment his plane landed back in the States, concern evident in his voice. What's wrong, Elle? Your message sounded serious. It is, I confirmed. But not something to discuss over the phone. Can you come to New York alone? There was a pause. That bad, huh? Should I be worried? It's complicated. But yes, it's important. 2 days later, Connor was sitting in my living room, jet-lagged but alert, studying my face with brotherly concern. You look different, he observed. Something's changed. I took a deep breath. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. Richard isn't my biological father. His face went blank with shock. What are you talking about? I explained everything. Aunt Margaret's revelation, Mom's confession, my meeting with James. Throughout my recounting, Connor's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally a profound sadness. All these years, he whispered when I finished. They lied to both of us. I'm sorry to dump this on you right after your honeymoon, I said, reaching for his hand. But I thought you deserved to know the truth. Of course I did, he agreed firmly. Jesus, Alora. This explains so much about how Richard always treated you. I noticed it, but I couldn't understand it. You noticed. This surprised me. Connor had always seemed oblivious to the subtle differences in how our parents treated us. Not at first, he admitted. But as we got older, yeah. The way he'd brag about my accomplishments but only politely acknowledge yours. How he never really encouraged your photography the way Mom did. He shook his head in disbelief. I just figured he was one of those dads who connected better with his son than his daughter. I never imagined. He trailed off, processing the implications. So we're half-siblings, I confirmed. Same mother, different fathers. He stood abruptly and pulled me into a fierce hug. You're still my sister, he said fiercely. Full half whatever, it doesn't change anything between us. I hugged him back, tears stinging my eyes. I was afraid you might feel differently. Never, he assured me. If anything, I'm furious on your behalf. They robbed you of knowing your real father. They robbed all of us of the truth. We spent hours talking, Connor, asking detailed questions about James, expressing outrage at our parents' decades-long deception. When he finally left to catch his train back to Connecticut, he paused at my door. I'm going to confront them, he warned. They need to know this isn't okay, what they did to you, to us. I know, I said. Just try to remember that Mom thought she was doing what was best for everyone. He snorted. Best for her reputation, maybe. Not for you. The fallout was swift and dramatic. Connor called me the next day, his voice tight with controlled anger. I've never seen Dad Richard so defensive. He actually tried to justify keeping you in the dark your entire life, and Mom just kept crying and saying she was sorry, as if that fixes anything. Did they ask about me? I couldn't help wondering. Of course! They want to know if you're going to replace them with James. He paused. Are you? It's not that simple, I said. I'm trying to get to know him, but 29 years of absence can't be erased overnight. And despite everything, Diana is still my mother. And Richard, he pressed. I hesitated. That's more complicated. In the weeks that followed, my family fractured and realigned in ways I couldn't have predicted. Connor, furious at the deception, barely spoke to our parents. He and Melissa delayed their plan to buy a house near the hospital in Oak Ridge, looking instead at properties closer to New York. I can get a position at any hospital, he told me during one of our now weekly dinners. And after what they did, I don't particularly want to live near them right now. Mom called daily, her messages growing increasingly desperate. Please, Alora. Just talk to me. We can work through this. Richard, true to form, retreated behind a wall of cold silence. No calls, no texts. His only communication came through Mom. Your father says hello, or your father wonders if you'll be home for Thanksgiving. Never Richard, always your father, as if repeating the title often enough would make it more true. Meanwhile, my relationship with James developed cautiously. We met for coffee every few weeks, gradually getting to know each other. He was careful never to push, never to assert paternal authority he hadn't earned. Instead, he approached me as an adult whose boundaries he respected, whose forgiveness he hoped to earn. I'd like you to meet Jessica and Emma, he suggested one afternoon as we walked through Washington Square Park. Whenever you're ready. No pressure. The thought of meeting my half-sisters still terrified me, but I was running out of reasons to postpone it. Maybe next month, I said tentatively. Once things settled down a bit more with Connor and my parents. James nodded, accepting my timeline without question. This careful respect for my autonomy was so different from the controlled environment I'd grown up in, where family obligations always trumped personal feelings. 3 months after Connor's wedding, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Richard stood in my hallway looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. May I come in? He asked formally. I stepped aside wordlessly, watching as he took in my space, the framed photographs on the walls, the books stacked on coffee tables, the evidence of the life I'd built without him. Connor tells me you've been seeing him, Richard said without preamble. Harrington, James I corrected. And yes, we've been getting to know each other. Richard nodded stiffly, hands clasped behind his back, like he was conducting a hospital inspection. And what is he to you now? Your real father? The air quotes were audible and they sparked a flare of anger. He's my biological father who wants to know me. That's all for now. I see. He paced the length of my living room. And what am I to you? Now that you have him? The vulnerability beneath the question caught me off guard. For the first time, I considered how this situation might look from Richard's perspective, the man who, despite his emotional limitations, had still been present for 29 years of my life. You're the man who raised me, I said carefully. That counts for something. It always will. But not enough, he concluded. That's not fair, I countered. You're the one who always kept me at a distance. You're the one who couldn't love me fully because I reminded you of Mom's affair. That was your choice, not mine. He flinched as if I'd struck him. It wasn't as simple as that, Alora. I tried. God knows I tried to love you the same way I loved Connor. But every time I looked at you, you saw him, I finished. I know, but that wasn't my fault. I didn't ask to be born from that affair. I was just a child who wanted her father's approval. And did you get it from him? This instant connection you never had with me, the naked jealousy in his voice was startling. It's different, I said. James and I are getting to know each other as adults. There's no pretense, no lie at the foundation of our relationship. Just two people trying to make sense of a complicated situation. Richard sat heavily on my sofa, suddenly looking his age. Your mother is devastated. She thinks she's lost you forever. She hasn't, I assured him. I'm still processing my anger at being lied to, but she's still my mother. That won't change. And me, he asked, meeting my eyes directly. Have you lost me forever? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with decades of complicated history. I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on whether we can build something new, something based on truth, this time. I don't know if I can accept him in your life, Richard admitted. The thought of you with him, building a relationship with him after everything. You don't have to accept him, I said. But you do have to accept that he's part of who I am. And that I have the right to know him. Richard stayed for an hour, our conversation circling around the same points, his sense of betrayal at my contact with James, my resentment over years of emotional distance, our mutual uncertainty about the path forward. When he left, nothing was resolved, but something had shifted the first honest conversation we'd ever had. That night, I finally opened the package James had given me. Inside were 5 journals, each covering roughly 6 years of my life. I braced myself for creepy stalker entries, but found instead a father's aching love for a child he couldn't claim. Birthdays he imagined celebrating with me. Advice he wished he could give about school friends' heartbreaks. Pride in my accomplishments that he observed from afar. A passage from my 16th year made me weep. Elora turned 16 today. Diana sent a photo. She's grown so tall with my mother's smile and my eyes. She's interested in photography, now capturing the world as she sees it. I wonder what she sees through her lens. What beauty does she find worth preserving? I walked past the high school near my apartment today, watching teenagers spill out the doors, laughing, texting, living their noisy, vibrant lives. I searched each girl's face, imagining you among them. Would you have friends who appreciate your quiet intelligence? Would you have my love of books, your mother's fierce determination? Would you hate math as I always did? These questions haunt me daily. 16 years of not knowing you, Elora. 16 birthdays without hearing your voice, without watching you blow out candles and make wishes. I hope wherever you are that you are loved completely. That Richard has found it in his heart to be the father you deserve. That someday if we meet, you might find it in your heart to forgive my absence. I closed the journal, overwhelmed. How different might my life have been if I had known this man all along, if I had grown up secure in the knowledge that 2 fathers loved me instead of suspecting that neither one did completely. The next day, I called James. I'd like to meet my sisters, I said. I'm ready now. Jessica and Emma Harrington were waiting at a restaurant in Soho when I arrived, James having excused himself to give us privacy for our first meeting. I recognized them immediately from the photos I'd looked up online, but seeing them in person was different, like catching glimpses of myself in a mirror at unexpected angles. Jessica, the older one, had my eyes and James's serious expression. Emma shared my high cheekbones and the nervous habit of tucking hair behind her ear. Both rose when they saw me, faces alight with a mixture of curiosity and welcome. Elora, Jessica said, stepping forward to greet me. We've waited so long to meet you. What followed was one of the strangest and most wonderful dinners of my life. We ordered too much food and talked over each other in our eagerness to compress 3 decades of sisterhood into one evening. They had questions about my photography, my life in New York, what I knew about our shared father. I wanted to know everything about growing up with James, about their mother, about their own lives as adults. He used to talk about you all the time, Emma revealed over dessert. Not in a sad way, but like you were just living somewhere else temporarily. He'd see something in a store window and say, I bet Elora would like that, as if you were just away at camp or something. We were jealous sometimes, Jessica admitted. He kept a photo of you on his desk, the only one Diana ever gave him, from when you were about 7. Sometimes it felt like he was saving his best self for this daughter he couldn't have. That's ridiculous, I protested. From everything you've told me, he was an amazing father to you both. He was, Emma agreed. But there was always this space in him. This sadness we couldn't touch. Now we understand why. By the time we parted, exchanging phone numbers and promises to meet again soon, I felt something shift inside me. The beginning of expansion of family growing beyond the narrow confines I'd always known. These women were not replacements for Connor, but additions to my life, connections I never knew I was missing. A week later, I received a text from Connor. Mom and Dad want to have dinner. All of us together. They say they have something important to discuss. Will you come? I hesitated, remembering the tension of my last encounter with Richard. But curiosity won out. When and where? The answer came back quickly. Their house. This Sunday at 7. Melissa and I will be there too. I arrived at my childhood home with a sense of déjà vu, reminded of the rehearsal dinner that had set this whole chain of events in motion. Mom opened the door, enveloping me in a tight hug before I could protest. "Thank you for coming," she whispered against my hair. The dining room was set with her best china candles, lit flowers arranged meticulously in the center of the table. Connor and Melissa were already seated, their expressions suggesting they knew as little about the purpose of this dinner as I did. Richard stood at the head of the table, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Once we were all seated and served, Richard cleared his throat. We asked you here tonight because we have something to say." He looked at me directly. "Particularly to you, Alora." I braced myself, unsure what was coming. "These past months have been difficult," he continued. "Your mother and I have had many long conversations about the decisions we made 30 years ago and their consequences for this family, for you." He took a deep breath. "I want to apologize. Formally and completely. What we did was wrong. We should have told you the truth from the beginning." I stared at him in shock. In 29 years, I had never heard Richard admit he was wrong about anything. We were so focused on protecting ourselves, protecting the family as we saw it. Mom added that we didn't consider the cost to you. The confusion you must have felt growing up, sensing something was off but never knowing what. "I was unfair to you, Richard," continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I allowed my resentment of the circumstances of your birth to affect how I treated you. That was unworthy of me as a father, as a doctor, as a man. You deserved better." "We've also been unfair to Connor," Mom said, turning to my brother. "Lying to you about your sister's parentage denied you both the chance to understand your relationship fully." Connor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Half-sister, full sister doesn't matter. We're family." "Yes, you are," Richard agreed. "Which brings me to the second part of why we asked you here." He looked at me again. "Your mother and I have discussed it, and we want to invite James to Thanksgiving dinner this year." The silence that followed was profound. I couldn't have been more shocked if Richard had announced he was joining the circus. What I managed finally. "It won't be easy for me," Richard admitted. "I won't pretend otherwise. But he is your biological father. He's part of your life now. And if we're going to move forward as a family, a real family built on truth this time, then we need to find a way to include him." I looked at Mom, who nodded in confirmation. "We mean it, Alora. It's time to stop pretending, to stop hiding. Whatever shape this family takes going forward, it has to include all of who you are." "What about Jessica and Emma?" I asked cautiously. My half-sisters, Richard paled slightly but nodded. "Them too if they wish to come. And if you want them there." Connor let out a low whistle. "That's going to be one crowded Thanksgiving table." "A full table is a blessing," Mom said firmly. "It's taken me too long to realize that." After dinner, Richard asked to speak with me alone. We walked in the garden where Mom's roses were fading with the approach of autumn. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that regardless of biology, regardless of the mistakes I've made, I am proud of the woman you've become, Elora. Your strength, your talent, your moral compass, those are qualities I always hope to see in my children. Even if I'm not really yours, I couldn't help asking. You are mine," he said simply. "Not in the way Connor is, perhaps, but in all the ways that matter, the years of tucking you in at night, bandaging scraped knees, watching you grow and find your path. Biology isn't destiny, Elora. Family is more than DNA. Is that why you're inviting James to Thanksgiving? Because you finally believe that I'm inviting him because I'm trying to be better," he admitted. "Because I've seen what my pride and resentment have cost this family." "Cost you?" He hesitated. "And because in a strange way he and I have something fundamental in common, we both love you. Different kinds of love built in different ways, but real nonetheless." On the train back to New York that night, I found myself crying, not from sadness, but from something more complex. Relief, gratitude, the release of a tension I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it wasn't natural. I texted James, "My parents have invited you to Thanksgiving, Jessica and Emma too. It might be awkward, but I'd really like you all to come." His response came quickly, "We would be honored. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Thanksgiving arrived with snow flurries and nervous anticipation. Mom had outdone herself with preparations. The dining room extended with extra tables to accommodate our expanded family. Richard had stocked the bar generously, perhaps anticipating the need for liquid courage. James arrived with Jessica and Emma bearing flowers for Mom and an expensive bottle of scotch for Richard. The initial introductions were stiff, the air thick with 3 decades of unspoken history. Connor played mediator, his natural charm easing the most awkward moments. Gradually, as wine was poured and food passed around, the atmosphere softened. Richard and James discovered a shared interest in fly fishing. Mom and Emma bonded over gardening tips. Jessica and Melissa fell into conversation about hospital administration, their shared professional world, creating instant common ground. I looked around the table. My biological father, the man who raised me, my mother, my half-brother, my half-sisters, my sister-in-law, and felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. This patchwork family stitched together from secrets and revelations, mistakes and forgiveness was messy and imperfect. But it was real in a way my perfect family never had been. After dinner, as everyone moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Connor pulled me aside. "You okay?" he asked, studying my face. "This must be surreal for you." "It is," I agreed. "But in a good way, I think. Like finding pieces of a puzzle I didn't know were missing." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when you first told me about James, I was furious with Mom and Dad. I couldn't understand how they could lie to us our entire lives. And now I see that they were doing the best they could with an impossible situation. It wasn't the right choice, but I understand better why they made it." He squeezed my shoulder. "What matters is where we go from here, and it seems like we're headed somewhere good." Later that evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen with both my fathers, Richard refilling his scotch glass, James helping with dishes. The silence should have been awkward but felt strangely companionable instead. "Thank you both," I said suddenly, "for being here, for trying." Richard nodded, his expression softer than I'd seen it in months. Family adapts, Alora. If these past months have taught me anything, it's that. James smiled, the gold flecks in his hazel eyes, my eyes catching the light. Some bonds transcend conventional definitions. I think we're discovering that today. As I looked at these 2 men, one who gave me life, one who shaped it, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The lies had been exposed, the secrets dragged into the light. What remained was the truth. Complicated, messy, but ultimately liberating. I was Alora Winters, and Alora Harrington, daughter of Richard and James, sister to Connor, Jessica, and Emma, photographer, storyteller, the product of both nature and nurture, both choice and chance. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely whole. Wow, what a journey this has been. If you've made it this far into my story, I can't thank you enough. Has your family ever experienced anything that completely changed how you saw your relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This family karma story taught me so much about forgiveness and what truly makes a Thanks, family. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share with anyone who might appreciate a tale about how truth, even when painful, can ultimately heal old wounds. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.